I'm Louise Field, the Director of Adore Your Pelvic Floor. We are a training provider to health and fitness professionals, and we also offer the Pelvic Floor Health Program to the community. This is an information video offering nutrition advice specific to men receiving treatment linked to prostate cancer. I am joined by the acclaimed Nigel Denby, registered dietitian based at Harley Street. We're going to streamline this session to nutrition for heart and bone health, but also about managing weight gain and also managing hydration. So, Nigel, thank you so much for coming here today. Really appreciate it.
This is such a pleasure, Louise, and thank you very much for asking me. I think what we need to do is keep this as practical and as you say, relevant heart health, bone health, and weight control, with something in there about hydration as well. Men that are receiving hormonal treatment as part of their prostate cancer management. Now, ultimately, I think what we've always got to explain is that once hormones start to be altered in any way, whether that's in a woman naturally or through treatment, as we're dealing with in this instance, the body begins to change. And the controls that many of those hormones will have maintained in your body begin to change. That's why, generally speaking, the things that we've done all our lives to control our weight don't seem to work anymore, because many of those hormonal controls have now changed as a result of the hormonal treatment you absolutely need to have managed the prostate cancer, that are having an effect, first of all, on your weight. If we think what happened, testosterone was giving you your male shape. It was making you broad across the chest. Now you start to find that the way your body lays down fat, as that testosterone is reduced and you're receiving other hormones as part of your treatment, means that the way you start to lay down fat changes. And often you'll find that fat starts to accumulate around your tummy, your waist circumference on your trousers begins to get really snug. And it might well be that nothing in your diet or your exercise regime has particularly changed, and that's absolutely normal. So if you're going to make an alteration to that, what you can't really change is the action of the hormones in your treatment. So you then have to look at, well, what can I change? And what you can change is the amount of calories that you put in and the type of calories that you expend through exercise. And that's going to be quite crucial. The way that you do your exercise is going to need to combine some strength or resistance training with some aerobic training. Again, for a lot of guys, that's going to mean now that you need to get really quite strategic almost in the way that you plan your exercise. So if we think, first of all, on the exercise point of view, why are you going to need to do this? What we have got to do, and one of the elements that you can change, is to increase your metabolic rate. Your metabolic rate is slowing down as a result of natural path of aging and muscle loss. We all start experiencing from about 35 onwards. We all gradually start losing muscle tissue, and that slows down your metabolic rate. Some men, when you start receiving your hormone treatment, it can speed up the rate at which you lose some of that muscle tissue. In turn, you start your metabolic rate slows down more quickly than it might have done ordinarily. Muscle tissue has a direct impact on your metabolic rate. Your metabolic rate is absolutely the thing that controls how efficiently you burn calories. It's almost like your fuel efficiency on your car, how many miles you can do a gallon. So if your metabolic rate is slowing down, is there anything we can do to change it? Absolutely, there is. So in the same way that you've lost muscle tissue, we can now start to rebuild and renew muscle tissue. This is going to have a massive impact on your ability to control any weight that you've gained as a result of hormone treatment. So what you need to do is a mixture of very consistent weight resistance exercise and an increase in your aerobic exercise. When it comes to the weight resistance exercise, if you don't want to, you don't need to go to a gym and start pumping iron. That's not what we're talking about. You would do really, really, really well to introduce some very simple exercise each day. Is going to incorporate the large muscle groups. So you might try some things like press ups. You might try some abdominal curls, not sit-ups, just gentle abdominal curls, working your core muscle. You might try things like squats, which will work your quads and your glutes, and also things like bicep curls, just using some simple hand weights. You can even use things like bottles of water or cans of beans, these sorts of things. The key with the weight resistance exercise is consistency. So I think it's far more beneficial, and there's good evidence to show, far more beneficial to do maybe 2, 3, or 4 repetitions of 10 of each of those exercises. You were able to do that about 4 or 5 times a week, rather than going to the gym and doing a really hard, sort of weights regime once or twice a week. 4 or 5 more gentle approach throughout the week will give your metabolic rate a real kick up the backside, because what it's going to do is let your muscles know every day you're asking them to do a little bit more. And in order to generate new muscle growth and speed that metabolism up, that's exactly what you need. So in terms of knowing whether you've worked hard enough, you kind of just need to feel that you're just managing to finish that set of exercises. And later that day, feel that you've done it. Just have a little bit of tenderness in your arms and your tummy, in your thighs and quads. If you can just have that tenderness, that's the muscles beginning to repair and rebuild, which is exactly what we want. So that's all you need to think about in terms of strength exercise. You need to then combine that with a really good baseline of physical activity levels. And that's going to mean really looking at your steps. You can use either a pedometer, you could use a smartphone if you've got one, or if you've got a fancy bit of kit like a Fitbit, that will be brilliant. Start and have a look at what your average daily steps are. And that might include going to get the paper, walking the dog, household chores, gardening, grocery shopping. Just see what your norm actually is, and then look to increase it. And I would say, to begin with, again, daily increase of about 2,000 or 3,000 steps. So if you're starting at, let's say, 3,000 steps is your average, aim to get it to 6. Ultimately, you want to get it up to about 10,000. But if you're starting at 3,000, a jump to 10,000 is quite a big step, and you're less likely to keep it going if you try to make a big jump like that. So what I would do is aim to get it up to 6, then take it up to 10. Again, much more important to do that most days of the week, rather than hit 18, 19,000 a couple of times a week. It's consistency that is so essentially we're talking about lifestyle. It isn't something that you're going to stop doing. It just becomes where you live. So now we've thought about exercise, let's think about diet. Okay, and again, what you don't need is a special diet. You just need a good diet. And what that's going to mean is, first of all, eating regularly, a breakfast, lunch, an evening meal, and probably a mid-morning and a mid-afternoon snack. These snacks are pit stops in the day, just keep you ticking along without letting you get so desperately hungry when it comes to a meal, you're likely to overeat. So look at your diet first of all and see if you eat regularly. If you do, think about your meals. Your meals, for me, need to contain foods from all of the food groups. So each meal, something I always ask people to do is try and imagine your plate divided into 4 quarters. Ideally, you want 1 quarter to be carbohydrate. That's going to be bread, potatoes, rice, pasta, cereals, any of those starchy carbohydrates. Ideally, whole grain, not always if that's not what your preference is. That's 1 quarter of the 4. Other quarter can be protein, and that would be meat, fish, poultry, nuts, pulses like beans and lentils, or eggs. Those are going to help your body. The carbohydrate's going to give you the fuel to do your exercise. The protein is going to give you a building block to produce the new muscle. The rest of the plate, so 2 quarters or half the plate, need to be full of vegetables, fruit, or salad. That way, you're going to now be getting usable fuel from the carbohydrate, building blocks for new muscle from the protein. And the rest of this is going to give you masses of vitamins and minerals that are going to help your body to recover from the treatment that you might have received. If you've needed surgery, if you're having your hormone treatment, if you've had radiotherapy, all of that is going to need some recovery time. And that's what the vitamins and the minerals do. They are also going to help protect you from other conditions that can sometimes occur when you've had your hormones altered. So things like diabetes, heart disease, and of course, other forms of tumor and cancers. So fruits, vegetables, really important part of your diet. But what you don't need to do is cut anything out. So by mixing up those food groups at each meal, you're going to get a really nice combination of all the nutrients that your body needs. Now, you can go a little bit further into it. So one of the things that is problematic when you have hormone treatments is that your bones can start to struggle a little bit in terms of their density. We start to see an increased rate of osteoporosis. Your job, if you like, of protecting your bones is to ensure that you're getting enough dietary calcium each day into your diet. And the easiest way to do that is to achieve 3 servings of dairy food a day. Each serving could be a 125-gram pot of yogurt, maybe the amount of milk that you would put on cereal, or a 25-gram matchbox-sized piece of cheese. Each of those counts as 1. You spread those across the day, you're going to be getting all the calcium your body needs. If you don't choose to use dairy products, then any of the alternatives that you use, like soya, oat, rice milk, any of these alternatives need to be calcium enriched, and you need to check on the label to see that they are. They don't have to be by law. Most of them are, some aren't. So always check the label. The other sorts of things to do, though, to take care of your bone health is to make sure you have a vitamin D supplement. And that's something excuse me, that's something that most people need to have every day. So even if you are outside exposed to some sunlight during the summer, it's still worth taking a vitamin D supplement every day. Something that gives you 10 micrograms a day is absolutely fine, and you'll get one of those, a one a day product in any general pharmacy. You don't need anything fancy. The other thing that tends to be slightly changed when your hormone treatment starts is that your risk of heart disease begins to increase a little. Now, all the fruits and vegetables we've mentioned are going to be great protectors there. There are some other things that you can do as well. So you remember on your food groups, you've got your quarter protein, quarter carbs, and lots of fruit and veg. If we switch over to the carbs and the protein, having more whole grains will be a very good step in heart or cardio protection. And that will mean choosing things like oats or whole grain pasta, brown rice, wholemeal bread, using other types of grains, things like bulgur wheat or couscous or pearl barley are all really brilliant whole grains. And they're just less refined than things like white bread, white pasta. Whole grain contains some really great nutrients. Also, the type of fiber that you find in there is really useful looking after your heart. Another thing to try and make sure of is that you have at least one, maybe 2 servings of oily fish each week. That's going to boost your intake of omega-3 fatty acids. These are the types of fats that are linked to really taking care of your heart. In terms of the sorts of oily fish you could use, you could have things like sardines, mackerel, salmon. These can even be canned. You could have trout, smoked salmon, kippers. The only type or one of the oily fish that we used to use and talk about a lot was tuna, but nowadays we can't count tuna as one of the oily fish. So remember, go for more things like mackerel, sardines, salmon, pilchards, all of these. You don't have to be cooking great pieces of fish if that's not your thing. You can just use the little cans of mackerel, make a sandwich, that type of thing. It doesn't need to be fancy food at all. The other sorts of things, though, to look out for when you're thinking about your heart health are trying to keep your intake of saturated fat down. So if you use lots of butter, maybe switch to a polyunsaturated spread. If you use lard to fry with, perhaps switch to something like a sunflower oil or a corn oil. And if you really like fat on your meat, then aim to try and trim some of that off and use leaner cuts, and that will all bring down your intake of saturated fat. A couple of other things to think about. For an awful lot of us, we tend to eat larger portions than we need. And if you're struggling with your weight, that's certainly something to keep a look on. So what I tend to do, the last phase of your portion size, so you've got your food groups nicely balanced, now have a look at the total meal. See, first of all, if that would fit into your cup hand. If it doesn't, if your meal is bigger, try to make it a bit smaller. Eat it really slowly. Ideally, no telephone, no iPad, no TV. Really concentrate on what you're eating. When you've finished that amount, that first serving, then just stop and see how you feel. If you're still feeling hungry, you might be, if you've been doing more exercise, go back and have a little more. If you're satisfied and all that means is no longer hungry, then that's enough. If there's leftovers, that can be lunch for tomorrow. Remembering we're going to have a well-balanced breakfast, lunch and dinner, plus 2 snacks. What we often see is many of us eat when we're ravenous and eat until we're stuffed. And that's where many of us can eat really well-balanced diet. We just eat too much of it. So by really getting conscious of your portion sizes and eating until you're satisfied, not stuffed, can save you anything up to about 500 calories a day. That's all you need to be losing around about 1 to 2 pounds a week. Combine that with your strength exercise, with an increase in your daily physical activity levels, and what you've started to have now a lifestyle plan. It keeps you in control of your weight, your bone health, and your heart health, regardless of the treatment that you've had. It's a lifestyle plan, not a diet, not a quick fix, not a fad or a gimmick. This is something now you could do for the rest of your life. And that's what healthy eating, managing your weight is all about. Lifelong lifestyle. Do it once, do it properly. You'll never have to do it again.
Wow, I love it. You know, what I love so much is this lifestyle plan. It is actually, the way you explain it, so easy, it's practical, it just gives us choices and just mindfulness of what we are actually putting into our body. And I just love it.
It can be so tempting, though, to look for a quick fix, look for something really radical. The problem is with a quick fix is it will always come to an end. And generally, what most of us will do is go back to our old ways, and in the end, nothing actually changes. And what we've got to do is make long-term, permanent changes. That's why, for me, it's lifestyle all the time, always wins.
That's fantastic. I have one more question, and that is with regards to hydration.
Absolutely. There's a lot of talk, and you'll often see people lugging around water bottles and what have you. You know, we used to talk about, to drink 2 litres a day. I think it's important to remember, probably 2 litres is about right. However, that doesn't have to be as bottles of water. You can use tea, you can use coffee, dilute juice, you can use a low-fat milk. If you're increasing your fruit and veg intake, you'll get a lot of fluid that way as well. Ideally, the best way to tell if you're hydrated enough is just take a look at your pee. And if your pee is a really nice pale straw color, like a crisp, dry white wine, then that's about right. If it starts to look a little bit darker, like a very oaked Chardonnay or weak tea, for instance, drink some more. I think, the best model to look at is what's normal for you. And again, if you know that your pee is always on the dark side, you almost certainly need to drink some more. But it's the very best check to look at. Again, if you're not even sure how much you drink at the moment, maybe just keep a record for a day or two of how many drinks you actually have in a day. And particularly, I think if guys have been struggling with prostate health, they might well have cut back on their drinks a little bit because of worrying about always having to look for the loo. If you're being treated, that bit should be behind you. Now you can think about getting your fluid levels to where your body needs them to be. But yeah, the best indicator, have a look at your pee.
Oh, that's wonderful. Nigel, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your expert advice. And I know that many men will appreciate it in the future. So thank you so very much.
Thank you for asking me, Louise. Real privilege.
Thank you. Bye-bye for now.
Take care.